To the pseudo-theists, I have this question. Instead of defining religion in such a narrow and/or vague way to redeem it and dodge its criticisms, what if we just dumped religions and God and keep their good ideas that we can see with tangible evidence, make for a better world? Hey everyone, Secular Spirit here, and this video was primarily inspired by none other than Jordan Peterson himself. Now, to clarify, I wasn't inspired by his all-beef diet.
I eat beef and salt and water. That's it. And I never cheat. Ever. Not even a little bit.
Nor was I inspired by his 12 rules for life, or his 12 more rules for life. Although I will say it is impressive that someone who seems to be constantly on the verge of a complete mental breakdown has written 2 best-selling self-help books. Don't get me wrong about that. But the inspiration for this video came from a video posted by Jordan Peterson on his YouTube channel earlier this summer, simply titled, Message to Muslims. Now the link is below in the video description if you want to watch the whole thing, but essentially, Peterson makes a well-intentioned plea to Muslims to stop their infighting and to reach out to the people of the book, Christians and Jews, and focus on what unites them, rather than fixate on what divides them. I know some other ex-Muslims have criticized Peterson's video for various reasons, and I have issues with when he talks about the ancient demonic spirit and a system of vengeful Luciferian ideas, whatever the hell that means. But here's my main concern with Peterson's message. When he asks Muslims to bridge divides and be good people to encourage others to join the religion, he's missing 2 key things. 1. The divides between Islam, Christianity, and other faiths are built into their doctrines and traditions, which are often mutually incompatible or downright contradictory. And 2, while religions like Islam do teach some good things, they also teach some horrible things, all built on blind faith that entrenches people in the hatred he decries. So while on the surface Peterson is arguing for good things, I think he's ignoring, knowingly or unknowingly I can't say, the reality of what people's religions, their faiths, are. And that's because Jordan Peterson isn't a typical believer in God. You could argue he doesn't even really believe in God, and definitely not the one that most theists believe in. There's billions of theists out there, and they believe all sorts of different things, even if they belong to the same religion or if they believe in the same God. For example, the practices of one Muslim can vary dramatically from the practices of another Muslim within the same family. This is the case because theists are largely pick and choosers. They pick and choose what they practice and believe and what they don't practice and believe. They tend to follow what their imam or rabbi or priest teaches or what they were raised to believe as children. Sometimes the things a theist chooses not to practice or believe can be something most followers believe or practice. For example, there are Muslims who see no problem with drinking alcohol and eating pork. Other times, they may not believe in core teachings of their faith. There are Muslims who believe there's only a heaven and no hell in the afterlife. I also recently discovered there are even Muslims who believe that Jesus is the Son of God, which most Muslims would say violates the central concept of Tawheed, or oneness of God, within Islam. And within the realm of pick and choosers is the subject of this video. What I find to be an incredibly frustrating category I'll call the pseudo-theists. The ones whose beliefs in God are so abstract, so general, and so vague, and yet they still consider themselves to be believers of some sort. I'm going to talk about 3 pseudo-theists who have had a significant impact in their impassioned defense of religion in recent years, and the key differences between what they believe and what most theists believe, and why their defense of what most theists believe is a problem. First off is the most renowned and controversial one of the bunch, Jordan Peterson. Peterson is probably the best example of the pseudo-theist because he struggles to give a clear answer to any question regarding his faith and what God means to him. When discussing his faith, Peterson once said, "I act as if God exists, and I'm terrified that he might." And when asked the question, "What is the God that he acts as though he exists?" by Sam Harris, during a famous conversation between the two of them, Peterson infamously gave one of the most convoluted, rambling non-answers of all time.
Okay, well, I'm I'm going to read some things that I wrote because it's so complicated that I'm not sure that I can just spin it off the top of my head, and so you'll have to excuse me. So, and what I'm going to do is sort of paint a picture by highlighting different things. So now I already made one point here. I made the point that part of the conception of God that underlies the Western ethos is the notion that whatever God is expressed in the truthful speech that rectifies pathological hierarchies. And that isn't all it does. It also confronts the chaos of being itself and generates habitable order. That's the metaphysical proposition. And that's best conceptualized as at least one element of God. And so I would think about it as a transcendent reality that's...
And Peterson goes on like this for another couple minutes. I left a link to the full video in the video description below too. In all the ambiguous responses Peterson has given over the years, what's a bit clearer is that he generally aligns himself with the traditions of Christianity. But your guess is as good as mine on what he believes is real and what isn't. Does Peterson believe in a literal heaven or hell? Does he not believe in them, but hope for them? Was Jesus literally born from a virgin and resurrected? Or were these stories simply symbolic metaphors? Peterson also often talks about how Jesus represents a melding of the narrative world we live in day to day and the objective world of transcendent truths, which I'm not going to get into here. The most important point is that this view of Christianity and God in general is not that of the majority. Note what seems to be missing in Peterson's discourse. A personal God who listens to your prayers and answers them. A God who performs miracles. A God who will send us to a literal heaven if we accept Jesus as our Savior. A God who will send us to a literal hell if we reject Jesus and his message. Keep that in mind when we get to the end of this video. Next, let's talk about a Muslim pseudo-theist, Reza Aslan. Aslan is a historian who's written books about both Islam and Christianity, but he's most famous for this legendary exchange with a moronic Fox News anchor.
Now, I want to clarify, you're a Muslim, so why did you write a book about the founder of Christianity?
Well, to be clear, I am a scholar of religions with 4 degrees, including one in the New Testament and fluency in biblical Greek, who has been studying the origins of Christianity for 2 decades, who also just happens to be a Muslim. So it's not that I'm just some Muslim writing about Jesus. I am an expert with a PhD in the history of religions. But I have been obsessed with Jesus.
Though, it still begs the question, why would you be interested in the founder of Christianity?
Because it's my job as an academic. I am a professor of religion, including the New Testament. That's what I do for a living, actually.
Aslan dabbled in both Christianity and Islam over the course of his life, before determining that he found himself most comfortable with the Muslim faith. In 2017, Aslan wrote the following when talking about his faith. Can you have faith without religion? Of course. But as the Buddha said, if you want to strike water, you don't dig 6 one-foot wells, you dig 1 6-foot well. In other words, if you want to have a deep and meaningful faith experience, it helps, though it is by no means necessary to have a language with which to do so. So then, pick a well. My well is Islam, and in particular, the Sufi tradition. Let me be clear, I am Muslim not because I think Islam is truer than other religions. It isn't. But because Islam provides me with the language I feel most comfortable with in expressing my faith. It provides me with certain symbols and metaphors for thinking about God that I find useful in making sense of the universe and my place in it. But I know, just as the Buddha did, that while my personal well may be different and unique, the water I draw from it is the same water drawn from everyone's wells. Indeed, having drunk from many wells in my spiritual journey, I consider it my mission in life to inform the world that no matter the well, the water tastes just as sweet. It makes sense that Aslan would identify with Islam's mystical Sufi tradition, which emphasizes searching inwards for a personal relationship with the divine essence of God. Many Sufis also practice what people in the West would describe as meditation in various forms. One famous example being that of the whirling dervishes, those people who dance around in circles over and over again. The idea being that these kinds of repetitive acts lead to a transcendent state, detaching us from our bodies and egos to tap into divine truths. There's other forms of meditative acts that aim at the same thing, and there's a lot of flexibility in terms of this inwards journey and what you take from it. Sufis are a small minority within Islam, and some more traditionalist Muslims find Sufis' acts to be blasphemous. And yet, Sufis still follow the commands of the Quran and try to emulate the practices of Muhammad. After having read Aslan's book on Islam, No God But God, it's clear he doesn't believe a lot of the things mentioned in the Quran literally happened. He views religion in general as dealing more in metaphorical, objective truths rather than historical this happened and that happened fact. And just to mention one example of a key point of divergence, when he says he doesn't believe Islam is truer than other religions, this seems to contradict the commonly held Muslim belief that Islam is the final true message from God, sent to correct the errors and divergences of past religions. Does Aslan refrain from drinking alcohol? Does he pray 5 times a day? Does he believe in literal heaven and hell? That I don't know. On to our last pseudo-theist, and the one whose life I find most fascinating and confounding, another religious historian by the name of Karen Armstrong. Born in the UK, Armstrong was a former nun who spent a traumatizing 7 years of abuse in a convent when she was young, leading to her disillusionment with God and religion. She then became an atheist before rediscovering her faith, sort of, after she started making documentaries about religion. Her belief is that the major religions were not always so filled with doctrine and commands, and that they boil down to the same thing. Maxims like do not do unto others what you would not have done unto you, and principles like compassion and humility. In a 2004 interview, Armstrong said, "All the great masters of religion tell us that what keeps us from a knowledge of the divine, from which has been called variously God, Nirvana, Brahman, the sacred, what keeps us from this ultimate reality is our own egotism, our greed that often needs to destroy others in order to preserve its sense of self, or even just to denigrate others. What compassion does, it makes us dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another there. And it's this that they all teach that leads us into the presence of the divine. It gives us an apprehension of the divine, not believing in creeds, not undertaking weird penances. What fascinates me about the case of Karen Armstrong is that she's a diligent historian who's researched religion's origins and development, who's written detailed books that outline the obvious man-made role in creating the doctrines of various religions and the motivations for creating them in terms of what purposes they served, and how the evolution of our needs as humans has led to an evolution in our religions and how we practice them. And yet, she remains a believer in this transcendent divinity. She calls herself a freelance monotheist who doesn't adhere to any specific religion. To summarize her work, she criticizes those who focus on the dark pasts and current suffering inflicted by religions, essentially blaming people and not the religions themselves. In her view, religion has been exploited by politicians, extremists, and abusers for their dark ends. The critics of religion are missing the full picture. They aren't focusing on all the positive and compassionate things that religion teaches. The irony here, of course, is that while Armstrong has a point, she commits the opposite error. She tends to focus on the positives and ignore or dismiss the negatives of the religions she defends. For example, she claims that a religion like Islam arose taking a position against violence, as did many other religions. But here's the thing about Islam, the religion of peace. The Quran and Hadith are filled with violence and cruelty, whether through God himself or through his followers. So if we were to combine the thoughts of our 3 academic pseudo-theists, they roughly argue for a common cause. There's more that unites us than divides us. Despite our different religions and religious practices, we all essentially believe in the same thing, an undefinable, transcendent notion of the divine that you could call God, and this is the God that different religions are tapping into. Generally speaking, they view many of the things that most believers profess are true more as metaphors that have truths within them that we can learn from. The pseudo-theists value faith in this transcendent divine as something that can counter the violence and selfishness of humanity. On these points, I have no issue. What this transcendent divine is very vague and may not actually be grounded in any discernible reality. It appears to be more of something that is a gut feeling that makes oneself feel good. I think those kinds of gut feelings can be good, but they can also be misleading and lead to delusion or worse. But if it's something that solely promotes positive things like the golden rule and things like compassion, then why not? But here's the problem. These individuals lump in all believers with themselves, saying that they're all essentially following the same thing. But this is obviously not true. Think of the Christianity and Islam that Peterson and Aslan talk about, and think about what the majority of Christians and Muslims practice. Now, there's no point in going into subjective discussions of what these religions truly are and what they aren't, because there are no real answers there. What matters is that hundreds of millions of people practice specific doctrines and believe specific things that are informing their lives and influencing their decisions, and often, sadly, it is the religion-taught fear, ignorance, prejudice, and blind obedience that is holding sway. When you call yourself a Muslim or a Christian, it isn't completely open to interpretation what that means. They come with baggage. They come with core ideas, even if you don't believe them or practice them yourself. If I were to use an analogy, it's the equivalent of a chessboard. Now, you can do whatever you want with the chess pieces. You can even just enjoy looking at the chessboard or its pieces and not do anything with them. Or you can come up with your own version of chess and play it with yourself and teach others. But that doesn't change the fact that chess means something else to many people, and that chess comes with rules that are more or less universally agreed upon. I find it bizarre that intellectuals like the ones we've covered here seem to be oblivious about these key points. And to Armstrong's one-sided defense of religion, here's the actual reality. Religion has both good and bad built into it, both peace and violence. It has been used for good things and destructive things. But that is exactly where the danger in religion lies. When you claim that these things emanate from the transcendent essence of everything, whether that's a creator with a will or not, it's hard to question it and easy to accept it without critical thinking. Naturally, dogmatic assertions of how to live your life and how to not live your life will follow. Naturally, because these religions are built on faith, people will disagree and start fighting amongst themselves. That's what happens when we have certainty without anything solid to back it up. Religion isn't evidence-based or results-oriented. It's tradition-based and fear-oriented. So to the pseudo-theists, I have this question. Instead of defining religion in such a narrow and/or vague way to redeem it and dodge its criticisms, what if we just dumped religions and God and keep their good ideas that we can see with tangible evidence? Make for a better world. Some will say we need faith in this transcendent divine to ensure that people do positive things despite the challenges and temptations of life. Without this transcendent divine, they'll sink and wallow in shallow materialism and egotism. But is that really the case? Or have we just been telling ourselves that for so long? Have we thought so little of ourselves as humans that we can't imagine being good without a God or divine essence telling us what to do? Why do things have to be so fanciful, so detached from our lives? Why must there be this added dimension to things, a thing beyond a thing, to get us to be compassionate, to get us to care, to make us want to make the world a better place? Isn't our day-to-day reality enough? Isn't the tangible suffering of ourselves and others enough for us to want to tackle them? Is happiness and fulfillment only something that can be achieved by the promise of something else? Something beyond us? I can almost imagine a pseudo-theist telling me that my belief that we can achieve a better world without this transcendent divine is my own connection with this transcendent divine, that I'm communicating in its language, even if I deny how it's working through me. I am looking inwards, yes, and I am looking to connect with others who share similar thoughts as me, but that's it. I'm not ascribing it to anything transcendent. I'm ascribing it to us as humans, and that's all we need. We don't have to turn it into something transcendent to value it. And we don't have to look for a deeper layer of existence to value this one. In the end, this is the only existence we know we have for sure. So let's make the most of it. I'm Secular Spirit, and I'll be back with another video soon.